The sun shone brightly over the bustling city of Ambervale, casting its golden glow on the towering buildings and bustling streets. It was a day of grandeur and spectacle, as the city's most prestigious auction house, Radiant Hall, prepared to host an event that had drawn attention from collectors and elites around the world. Luxury cars gleamed under the sunlight as they pulled up to the red-carpeted entrance, each delivering men and women dressed in the finest attire. The energy outside the venue was electric, with photographers snapping pictures and reporters eagerly documenting every glamorous arrival. Inside, the auction hall was a scene of opulence. Glittering chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, casting warm light over the crowd. Rows of plush seats lined the floor, each occupied by individuals whose wealth and status could be measured by their tailored suits and exquisite gowns. The air buzzed with anticipation as the auction house staff meticulously prepared for the event. Amidst this sea of elegance stood an old man near the entrance. He was a striking contrast to the lavish surroundings. His clothes were simple, an old faded shirt tucked into fraying trousers, with a pair of sandals that had clearly seen better days. His face bore the deep lines of age, but his eyes were sharp, scanning the room with quiet determination. He leaned slightly on a wooden cane, his thin frame almost lost amidst the grandeur around him. The crowd couldn't help but notice him, though their reactions were far from kind. Some whispered behind their hands, their laughter barely concealed. "What's he doing here?" a woman in a sequined dress muttered to her companion. "Lost, perhaps?" the man replied with a chuckle. "He looks like he couldn't even afford a glass of water here." The old man heard every word, but he gave no reaction. His face remained impassive, his eyes focused ahead. A passing waiter hesitated before offering him a glass of champagne, but the old man declined with a polite shake of his head. Despite the mocking stares and snide remarks, the old man stood his ground. He seemed out of place, yet completely unbothered by the judgmental eyes around him. His attention was fixated on the stage at the far end of the hall, where an ornate podium awaited the auctioneer. To him, nothing else in the room mattered. As the clock struck 3, the auctioneer, a poised man with a commanding voice, stepped onto the stage. The murmurs in the crowd died down instantly, replaced by an expectant hush. The auction was about to begin. The first item to be presented was a breathtaking 19th century painting. Its vibrant colors and intricate brushstrokes displayed prominently on a screen behind the stage. The auctioneer introduced the piece with an air of reverence, announcing a starting bid of $500,000. Bids were immediately shouted from every corner of the hall. The numbers climbed rapidly, the excitement in the room palpable. The old man, however, remained rooted in his spot by the entrance, his hands resting lightly on the handle of his cane. He showed no interest in the painting, nor in the luxurious items that followed. But as the auction progressed, something changed. When the auctioneer revealed a particular item, a wooden box encrusted with gemstones, its craftsmanship exquisite and steeped in historical significance, the old man's demeanor shifted. His grip on his cane tightened, and his eyes lit up with a spark of recognition. "This," he murmured softly to himself, "this is what I've been waiting for." The crowd leaned forward as the auctioneer began to describe the box. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is no ordinary artifact. This intricately inlaid wooden box is believed to be over a century old, created by master artisans of its time. It is not just a container, but a piece of history, a treasure to be cherished for generations." The starting bid for the box was announced, $1 million. Gasps rippled through the room, followed by murmurs of excitement. The audience was eager to see who would bid on such a rare and expensive item. The auctioneer looked out into the sea of faces, waiting for the first bid. Then, cutting through the tense silence, came an unexpected voice from the back of the hall. It was steady and firm, though not loud. $1 million, the old man declared. Every head in the room turned toward him. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Is he serious? Does he even have the money? What kind of joke is this? The old man, oblivious to their disbelief, took a step forward, his sandals scraping softly against the polished marble floor. All eyes were now on him, their earlier amusement replaced by curiosity and skepticism. The auctioneer, momentarily startled, adjusted his glasses and asked, "Sir, are you placing a bid of $1 million?" Yes, the old man replied simply, his gaze unwavering. And with that, the atmosphere in the hall shifted. The glitzy auction, once a celebration of wealth and privilege, was now shrouded in mystery. Who was this old man? What was he doing here? And, most importantly, could he truly back up his bold claim? As the tension in the room mounted, the old man remained calm, his eyes never leaving the wooden box on the stage. To him, this wasn't about wealth or appearances. It was about something far deeper, something only he understood. The auctioneer hesitated for a moment, his eyes flicking between the old man and the audience. The room was still, a palpable tension hanging in the air. In the world of high society auctions, a single misstep could ruin reputations, and a bid from an uninvited, scruffy figure was nothing short of bizarre. The whispers started again, only this time they carried an edge of intrigue rather than mockery. $1 million, the gentleman says, the auctioneer finally spoke, his voice steady despite the surprise. He cleared his throat. Do we have any bids higher than that? The room remained silent. Not a soul in the crowd moved. The item had already stirred the interest of some of the wealthiest patrons in the room, and yet none dared to challenge the old man's bid. I'll raise the bid to $1.5 million. A confident voice suddenly rang out from the far side of the room. A tall, slender man in an immaculate three-piece suit, his polished shoes gleaming, had stood from his seat. His dark hair was slicked back, and his expression was one of controlled arrogance. The crowd turned to him, and a few individuals exchanged knowing looks. His name was Victor Sheffield, heir to the Sheffield fortune, and his presence was synonymous with power. He had acquired some of the world's rarest artifacts over the years, and the whispers among the elite said he was the undisputed king of luxury. But there was something about the way he raised his bid, almost as if he hadn't expected the old man to challenge him. The old man did not flinch. His eyes remained fixed on the wooden box, unwavering, as if he had heard nothing. $2 million, the old man said, his voice quiet, but it carried through the hall with undeniable force. This time, the room was stunned into silence. The audacity of the bid was staggering, $1 million increase in the blink of an eye. Several people around the room began to murmur, exchanging glances as they turned their attention back to the old man. Was this a ploy? Was he merely a figurehead, playing a game they didn't understand? Or did he truly possess the means to back up his words? Victor Sheffield's face hardened. For a moment, he looked as though he might laugh, but instead his eyes narrowed. The challenge was too great to ignore, too personal to let pass. $5 million, he called, his voice cutting through the room with sharp clarity. A ripple of surprise ran through the crowd. $5 million, far beyond what anyone had anticipated. The bidding had escalated quickly, and yet, still, the old man made no move. His stance was firm, his gaze never wavering from the box. The auctioneer glanced nervously at the crowd, then at the old man. It was clear to him that this was no ordinary bidding war. But it was also becoming clear that no one knew who the old man was or what his true intentions might be. $10 million, the old man declared, his voice unwavering. The sudden shift was almost palpable. The gasps of the crowd were audible, their collective breath catching in surprise. Some looked at each other in disbelief, while others tried to hide their admiration. There was no doubt now. This was no joke. This man was serious. Victor Sheffield's jaw clenched. He could feel the heat of competition rising in his chest, the sting of being outbid. The people in the room were beginning to see him as less invincible, less in control. He had to stop this. He had to regain the upper hand. $20 million, he said, his voice colder now, almost dangerously so. A new tension settled over the room. The stakes had just been raised to an extraordinary level. Who was this man, and what was his purpose in being here? The old man's eyes flickered for the first time, a brief moment of hesitation. Then, with a deep breath, he said, $50 million. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. The crowd's silence was deafening. Victor Sheffield's eyes widened for the briefest second before narrowing into a sharp, calculating gaze. The audacity of the old man was beyond anything he had ever encountered, and it infuriated him. $50 million was a sum he had never once offered at an auction, not even for something as precious as this. But there was something about this moment, the way the crowd seemed to shift, the way the old man had so easily doubled his bid, that made Victor see red. He stood frozen for a moment, seething, his fingers tapping impatiently on the armrest of his chair. Then, without a word, he sat back down, his lips pressed into a tight line. He was defeated for now, but he wasn't ready to let go of the fight entirely. There were other ways to win, other ways to take control of the situation. The auctioneer, stunned by the sudden escalation, cleared his throat once more. 50 million, he repeated, his voice quivering slightly with the tension. Going once. Going twice. Sold. The crowd erupted into whispers, and though the room remained filled with opulence, there was a sense of unease now. The old man had just won the most coveted item of the evening, an item that even Victor Sheffield had wanted desperately, and at an unimaginable price. As the auctioneer gestured for the item to be brought to the front, all eyes turned to the old man. But the old man did not stand. He remained still, rooted in place, as though this was all merely part of a far larger plan. The wooden box was brought toward him, but he did not touch it. Instead, his gaze remained distant, almost as though he had already moved beyond the auction itself. For the crowd, the real question had only just begun. Who was this mysterious figure? What could he possibly want with such a priceless artifact? A few daring individuals began to make their way toward him, eager to approach the strange old man. But none of them had the courage to speak first. Everyone knew that this man was different, that his victory was more than just a triumph of wealth. It was a sign of something deeper, something more powerful. The old man finally turned to face the crowd, his expression unrateable. "It's not about the money," he said softly, though his voice carried like a rumble across the room. "It's about the legacy." As the auction hall fell into a stunned silence, the air seemed to hold its breath. No one knew it yet, but the true significance of this moment was about to unfold. And with it, the old man's deeper, mysterious purpose. The room fell eerily quiet, the air thick with unspoken questions. The old man's cryptic statement lingered like a weight over the crowd. He had already demonstrated his wealth, his power, and his willingness to outbid anyone in the room without hesitation. But what did he mean by "it's about the legacy"? The people gathered in the grand hall exchanged glances, some attempting to decipher his words, others simply waiting for the next move. Victor Sheffield, his jaw clenched, was the first to break the silence. He slowly stood from his seat, eyes fixed firmly on the old man. His voice, when he spoke, was colder than before. "Legacy?" he repeated with a scoff. "Is that what this is all about? A legacy tied to some trivial artifact?" The old man remained calm, almost serene in the face of Victor's provocation. He didn't flinch, didn't even look at the wealthy heir. His eyes were still fixed on the object before him, the wooden box that now seemed to hold far more significance than it had at the start of the auction. There was something almost reverent in the way he gazed at it. The auctioneer, still nervously watching the scene unfold, cleared his throat again. "Ladies and gentlemen, the item has been successfully sold," he began, his voice trembling ever so slightly. "Please, let's proceed with the formalities." But no one moved. No one left their seats. The tension in the room was palpable, as if the air itself were charged with the electricity of an impending storm. Everyone was waiting for something, some explanation, some shift in the balance of power. Everyone wanted to understand why the old man had said those words. The old man finally spoke, his voice soft but carrying an undeniable authority. "The object you see before you," he began, lifting his hand to gesture toward the wooden box, "is not a mere trinket. It is a key." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle into the room. "It holds the secrets of a legacy, one that has been hidden for centuries, a legacy that, if revealed, would change everything." A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. A legacy? A key? The whispers grew louder, and the curiosity in the room became almost tangible. Everyone in the hall was now looking at the box, wondering what it contained and why the old man was so insistent on its importance. No one had anticipated this revelation. No one had expected the auction to become a stage for secrets and mysteries far more profound than anyone had imagined. Victor Sheffield, who had been watching with an air of superiority, now seemed genuinely intrigued. He leaned forward, his gaze narrowing. "Secrets? A legacy?" he said, his tone skeptical. Yet there was a flicker of something else in his eyes, something like greed. "You really expect us to believe that this piece of wood could have such significance?" The old man met his gaze, his eyes hardening for the first time. "It's not the wood that matters," he said, his voice low and full of meaning. "It's what it represents, what it can unlock." The crowd leaned in, and the auction hall fell into a hushed silence, everyone hanging on his every word. "This box," the old man continued, "contains the map to an empire that no one has ever heard of. An empire of unimaginable wealth and power, hidden from the world for generations. Those who seek it will stop at nothing to uncover its secrets. And I?" He stopped, taking a deep breath. "I intend to find it." The implications of his words were enough to send a chill through the room. For a moment, even the wealthiest of the guests seemed taken aback. Their usual arrogance dimmed in the face of the old man's confidence. The object they had just witnessed being sold for an astronomical sum was not just a collectible, it was a key to untold riches. And now, this mysterious figure was claiming he held the map to an empire that could change the very fabric of history. Victor Sheffield's mind raced. The idea of a hidden empire, of wealth beyond imagination, was too tempting to ignore. He had spent his life building his own empire of luxury, acquiring treasures, gaining power. But the thought of something larger, something no one else knew about, was a different kind of challenge, one that he was not prepared to back down from. "So, you're saying this map," Victor trailed off, his voice now tinged with disbelief, "leads to a fortune that could rival the world's greatest treasures?" His tone was still mocking, but there was a clear shift in his demeanor. He was no longer dismissive. He was intrigued and desperate to know more. The old man smiled faintly, but it wasn't a smile of amusement. It was a smile of someone who had long ago accepted the weight of the knowledge he possessed. "It's more than just a fortune. It's power. And it's been kept hidden for centuries, locked away by those who feared what would happen if it fell into the wrong hands." A murmur passed through the room. People were beginning to understand the gravity of what was at stake. This was no ordinary auction. This was no ordinary bid. The old man had just revealed that the stakes were far greater than anyone had imagined. What had been a simple display of wealth was now a potential game changer. Victor Sheffield, his interest piqued, took a step toward the old man. "So you're claiming that you're the one who will find this empire? That you have the map?" The old man nodded slowly. "Yes, I am the one who will uncover it. And when I do, it will change everything you think you know about the world. The empire I speak of was built on more than just money. It was built on knowledge. And knowledge is the greatest form of power there is." For the first time, the old man's words were starting to make sense to those in the room. This wasn't just about wealth. It was about something far more elusive. Knowledge, power, and the ability to control what others could only dream of. The room seemed to grow smaller as the implications of his words sank in. The old man wasn't just a bidder at an auction. He was a man with a purpose that could shape the future of the world. Victor Sheffield, his face now a mixture of curiosity and greed, stepped closer. "And what do you intend to do with this power? Once you find it?" The old man's gaze hardened. "I intend to secure it. To use it not for my own gain, but to ensure that those who are worthy will have the means to reshape the world." The room was silent once more. This was not a man speaking of simple riches. This was a man who was laying claim to something far more profound, something that could rewrite history itself. The auctioneer, realizing that the atmosphere in the room had shifted beyond the event's intended purpose, cleared his throat again. "Ladies and gentlemen, the formalities are complete," he said, his voice now tinged with a nervous edge. "Please, we invite you to view the artifact in greater detail, should you wish." But no one moved. No one was thinking about the artifact now. They were thinking about the legacy, about the empire, about the power that lay just within reach if they could only unravel the mystery of the old man's words. Victor Sheffield, never one to back down, took another step closer to the old man. "So, how do we begin?" he asked, his voice a mix of challenge and intrigue. "How do we find this empire?" The old man smiled once more, this time with a glimmer of something dangerous in his eyes. "We begin by opening the box," he said, his voice low and full of purpose. As the crowd leaned in, the air thick with anticipation, the old man slowly reached for the box. The auction had just taken a turn that no one could have predicted. What had started as an event to acquire rare treasures had now become the beginning of a journey that could change the world. The moment the old man's hand touched the wooden box, a shiver ran through the room. It wasn't just the weight of his fingers on the polished surface. It was the sensation that something immense, something powerful, was about to be revealed. The crowd held its collective breath, the air thick with anticipation. The auction hall, once filled with the hum of whispered chatter and the clinking of glasses, was now eerily quiet. Victor Sheffield watched intently, his gaze never leaving the box. His usual air of superiority had dissolved, replaced by an obsession with what might lie inside. The idea of uncovering a hidden empire, an empire built on knowledge, wealth, and power, consumed his every thought. His fingers twitched at his sides as though he could already feel the riches slipping through his grasp. And yet, there was something more. The power the old man spoke of was far more intoxicating than mere treasure. It was the promise of shaping the world itself. The old man's fingers brushed across the edges of the box, his movements deliberate, as though he were savoring the moment. His lips parted in a silent breath of reverence, and for the first time there was a flicker of something other than calm control in his eyes. There was a spark of something ancient, almost unearthly. Slowly, he lifted the lid. For a split second, nothing seemed to happen. There was only the soft creak of the box opening, the quiet rustle of air in the stillness. But as the lid fully opened, the room seemed to hum with energy, as if the very air was reacting to what had just been revealed. Inside the box was a rolled-up piece of aged parchment, tied with a ribbon of dark, worn leather. The parchment was yellowed with age, its edges frayed, as though it had been handled many times over centuries. But it wasn't the parchment itself that held everyone's attention. It was the symbol engraved into the wax seal that held the ribbon closed. The symbol was unfamiliar to most of the guests, but to those who had seen such things before, it was unmistakable. It was the symbol of an ancient order, an order that had been erased from history. A gasp echoed from the crowd, a ripple of realization dawning on the faces of the more learned members of the elite gathering. The old man smiled, his eyes gleaming with the knowledge of something others could scarcely comprehend. Victor Sheffield's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" he demanded, stepping closer. His voice filled with both curiosity and a touch of disbelief. This order, what does it mean?" The old man's lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. "It means everything," he said softly, lifting the parchment with careful hands. "This is the map. This is the key to everything, and those who seek it will understand its power." For a moment, no one dared to speak. It wasn't that they lacked questions. It was that the weight of what was happening in that very room was too immense to put into words. No one had expected an auction to unveil such a monumental secret. The wealth and artifacts they had all hoped to acquire now seemed trivial in comparison to the revelations unfolding before them. Victor Sheffield's mind raced. He had spent years cultivating his own empire, his network of corporations, his art collection, his influence in the highest circles. But all of that felt suddenly insignificant. A map, an empire, a legacy of knowledge that could reshape the world? He had to have it. He couldn't let the old man walk away with something so monumental, so life-altering. "How do we know this isn't some fantasy?" Victor asked, his tone low but insistent. "How can we be sure this isn't just a tale, a myth?" The old man locked eyes with him, his expression unwavering. "You'll see soon enough," he said, his voice low and full of quiet authority. "History has always been shaped by those who dare to unlock its secrets." The tension in the room was palpable as the guests exchanged glances, their thoughts swirling with possibility. Some were intrigued by the map, while others were calculating how they could acquire it for themselves. But there was one person in the room who was not merely interested in the wealth or power the map represented. There was one person who had come to this auction not for the treasures it held, but for the very thing the old man had just revealed. The woman standing at the back of the room, watching the scene unfold, felt her heart race. Her name was Amelia Blackwood, and she was no stranger to secrets. She had spent years investigating ancient artifacts, uncovering the mysteries of long-lost civilizations, but nothing had prepared her for what she was witnessing now. This map, this ancient order, it was everything she had been searching for. It was the culmination of decades of research, the very key to the knowledge she had sought her entire life. Amelia knew that she couldn't let this opportunity slip away. She had to have the map. She had to follow the path it would lead her on. The promise of uncovering a hidden empire was more than a temptation. It was a calling. She had been chosen, in some cosmic way, to unlock its secrets. Her eyes locked onto the parchment in the old man's hands, and in that moment, she knew that nothing would stop her from obtaining it. She would do whatever it took to gain control of the legacy that had just been unveiled. Victor Sheffield was already plotting his next move, his thoughts consumed with the idea of acquiring the map. He could see it in his mind's eye, the wealth, the influence, the sheer power that would come with possessing it. But the old man wasn't interested in selling it to the highest bidder. He wasn't interested in trading this secret for money or status. He had a different plan. Amelia's thoughts were far more focused. She was not here to negotiate or bid. She had a single goal: to obtain the map and ensure that no one else would be able to unlock its power before her. She had the means to do so. She had the connections, the resources, and the drive. Now, all she needed was to act. As the old man carefully unrolled the parchment, revealing strange markings and symbols that seemed to shimmer in the dim light, the entire room was consumed by a shared sense of awe. The map was far more than just a simple guide. It was a treasure trove of knowledge, a blueprint for those who could decipher its cryptic markings. But even as the guests marveled at the ancient document, their minds were already racing, calculating how they might be able to seize control of it. Amelia felt the weight of their ambition pressing down on her, but she remained resolute. This was her moment. She would not be deterred. The empire that lay ahead would be hers, and she would stop at nothing to claim it. The old man's voice broke through the tension once more. "This map," he said, "is more than just a key to wealth. It is a key to power, a power that has been hidden for centuries. Whoever holds it holds the future of the world." Victor Sheffield, despite himself, felt a chill run down his spine. This was no longer about money. It was about something far more dangerous and far more captivating. As the old man continued to explain the significance of the map, Amelia's heart pounded in her chest. The auction had only just begun, and yet it had already become a fight for the future itself. The game had changed, and she was ready to play. The tension in the room was palpable. Each person present had felt the pull of the map, like a gravitational force, drawing them into its mystery and promise. The old man, seemingly oblivious to the growing desires around him, carefully examined the parchment, his weathered fingers tracing over the ancient symbols as if he were communing with something beyond the realm of mortal understanding. Victor Sheffield's mind was in turmoil. His initial shock at the map's significance was slowly being replaced by a consuming ambition. He had spent years building his empire, mastering every corner of his vast network of corporations, art, and finance. But this map was something different. It wasn't about money or influence anymore. It was about legacy, the kind of legacy that could change the course of history itself. He stepped forward, his voice low but filled with authority. "How much?" he demanded. The auction had long since stopped being about wealth in its conventional sense. This was a matter of power, of untold influence, and Victor wanted it more than he had ever wanted anything in his life. The old man's eyes shifted to him, cold and calculating. "It is not for sale," he said, his voice as steady as ever. "Not to someone who sees it as a mere commodity." Victor's fists clenched at his sides, his jaw tightening. He could feel the heat of Amelia Blackwood's gaze behind him. She was watching, calculating, just like him, but there was something in her eyes, a quiet determination that unsettled him. She wasn't here to play by the rules. She was here for something far more important than a transaction. Victor turned, his eyes locking with hers. She didn't flinch or look away. Instead, she smiled faintly, the kind of smile that suggested she knew something he didn't. A secret, a hidden advantage, that was just out of his reach. "You misunderstand," Victor said, his voice dripping with an edge of menace. "I'll pay whatever it takes. The map is mine." Amelia's smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "You think power is something you can simply buy?" she asked, her voice calm but with a note of challenge. "This isn't about money. It's about understanding. It's about control. And no one here understands that better than I do. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and the room seemed to shrink as the two of them stood locked in a silent contest of wills. The old man, sensing the building animosity between them, finally spoke again, his voice softer now, almost wistful. "You both misunderstand," he said, eyes flickering between Victor and Amelia. "This map is not for either of you, not unless you're willing to give up everything you know, everything you believe." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. This was what she had feared. This wasn't just a treasure to be acquired. It was a test. Whoever sought it would have to sacrifice something profound in order to unlock its true power. And that sacrifice would not come easily. Victor's eyes darkened with frustration. "I don't need lessons in power," he spat, his voice rising with intensity. "I've built an empire from nothing. I know what it takes." The old man shook his head, his face etched with a deep, timeless sorrow. "You think you've built something, Victor, but you've only created shadows. Empires crumble. History remembers those who truly understand the cost of power. This map will show you that cost." A moment of silence passed. Everyone in the room was on edge, sensing that the auction had taken a turn far beyond their comprehension. The luxury, the glittering prizes they had anticipated were nothing compared to the revelation of this map, this ancient artifact which held the keys to something unimaginable. Amelia, however, was resolute. The old man's words only solidified her belief in her purpose. She had spent her life uncovering the secrets of ancient cultures, tracing the lines of forgotten civilizations. This map was the key to unlocking something that could change everything, not just for her, but for the world. She could feel it deep within her. This wasn't just an opportunity. It was her destiny. "Enough talk," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "I won't wait any longer." She stepped forward, her eyes never leaving the old man. Without hesitation, she reached out for the map, her fingers brushing the ancient parchment. The crowd gasped, the moment so charged with intensity that it seemed to stop time itself. But the old man's hand shot out, his fingers gripping the parchment with surprising strength. His grip was firm, almost desperate. "You cannot have it," he said, his voice now laced with urgency. "Not yet." Amelia's pulse quickened. The old man's resistance only fueled her desire. She had to have it. She had come this far. There was no turning back now. She tightened her grip on the map, pulling it toward her, but the old man's hand held steady. Victor, who had been silently watching the exchange, stepped forward, his own hand reaching out. He had been silent long enough. He wasn't going to let Amelia take it, not without a fight. The room erupted into chaos as Victor and Amelia both made a grab for the map. There were no words now, only the primal instinct to possess. The old man's hands trembled with the effort of holding onto it, but his voice remained eerily calm. "You are both fools," he whispered, his tone a mixture of sorrow and resignation. "You do not understand what you're risking. The price of power is more than you can afford." But neither Victor nor Amelia was listening. The room seemed to spin as the two of them fought, tugging and pulling, each desperate to claim what had been hidden for so long. And then, with a sudden, forceful tug, Amelia wrenched the map from the old man's grasp. The parchment fell into her hands, the leather ribbon fluttering loosely in the air as the room fell into stunned silence. Victor's eyes widened with disbelief, his face contorting in anger and frustration. "No!" he shouted, taking a step toward her. But Amelia, breathing heavily, held the map close to her chest. Her fingers traced the worn symbols, feeling the pulse of its power beneath the ancient paper. She could already sense its secrets whispering to her, filling her with a hunger she couldn't quite explain. "I told you," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I was meant to have this." The old man, his face pale and drawn, stepped back, his hands trembling. "It's too late now," he murmured, almost to himself. "You've sealed your fate." Amelia's heart raced, the weight of his words sinking in. There was no turning back. She had the map now, and it would lead her on a path from which there would be no escape. The power she had sought was now in her grasp, but so was the terrible cost. Victor stood motionless, his expression dark. He knew the game had changed. He had underestimated Amelia Blackwood, and now he would have to reckon with the consequences. As Amelia turned, her mind already racing with possibilities, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The map had already started to change her, to alter the very course of her future. And she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer playing for money or status. She was playing for something much, much greater. The room was silent, the echo of that truth hanging in the air like a promise or a warning. And the game had only just begun. Amelia stood still, the map clutched tightly in her hands. The silence in the room pressed in on her, heavy and suffocating. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the room, Victor's burning with fury, the old man's filled with an ominous warning, and the rest of the onlookers, a mix of shock, curiosity, and fear. The map seemed to hum in her grasp, almost alive, as if it was responding to the touch of its rightful owner. Her breath came faster, a rush of adrenaline surging through her veins. This was it, the thing she had dreamed of for so long. The key to unlocking a power greater than anything she had ever known. But even as the weight of her triumph settled in, something in the back of her mind stirred, a nagging sense of unease. The old man's words echoed in her ears. The price of power is more than you can afford. Victor stepped forward, his eyes still burning with rage, but there was something else there now, a shift in his demeanor, as if a new, darker resolve had taken root inside him. His voice was low, but there was no mistaking the venom in it. You may have it now, Amelia, but this isn't over. You don't know what you're holding, what you've taken. Amelia met his gaze, her grip tightening on the map. It's over for you, Victor, she said, her voice steady. I won. This is mine now. Victor laughed, but it wasn't the triumphant, mocking laugh of someone in control. It was a sound full of disbelief, tinged with fear. You think you've won? You've only begun to pay the price. His eyes flicked to the old man, who stood silently in the corner, watching the exchange with an almost mournful look on his face. You're playing a dangerous game, Amelia, and you're not the only one who knows its rules. The old man's voice, when it finally came, was soft but heavy with gravity. Victor is right. You cannot begin to comprehend what this map leads to. The journey you are about to undertake, it will change you. It will consume you. Amelia felt a cold shiver run down her spine, but she refused to show fear. She had worked too long, fought too hard to get to this point. She wasn't going to let anyone take this from her. Not Victor, not even the old man. She was the one holding the map now, and she knew it had been meant for her. I've already made my choice, she said, her voice firm, as if trying to convince herself as much as them. I'll take whatever comes with it. Victor's expression darkened, his jaw clenched. Very well, but don't say I didn't warn you. Amelia could feel the intensity in the room escalate. The stakes had shifted. The battle for the map was no longer about wealth or power in the traditional sense. It had become something far darker, far more dangerous. There was no turning back now. The old man moved closer to her, his steps slow and deliberate. You must understand something, child, he said, his voice softer now, almost tender. You are about to step into a world that has been hidden from you. The map is a doorway, a portal to something beyond your comprehension. It will reveal truths that are not meant for the human mind to grasp. And if you're not careful, it will consume you. Amelia didn't back away. She held the map up, her fingers brushing over its surface, feeling the faint warmth that radiated from it. Her mind raced, thoughts swirling as she considered his words. But despite the warning, she couldn't help the feeling that she was destined to uncover whatever lay beyond the map's secrets. She had already made her choice. She wasn't going to turn back now. I can handle it, she said, more to herself than to anyone else. The old man's eyes softened for a brief moment, as if he saw something in her. A determination, a resolve, that both intrigued and saddened him. You think you can control it, but power like this, it doesn't belong to anyone. It's a force of nature, and it will break you if you aren't ready. Amelia stepped back, her posture defiant. I am ready, she declared, her voice strong. I've prepared for this my entire life. Victor, meanwhile, stood quietly in the background, his gaze flickering between Amelia and the old man. His frustration was palpable, but there was something more beneath it, something darker. You really don't get it, do you? He said to Amelia, his voice cold. You think you can handle whatever comes next, but you're wrong. That map is only the beginning. It will drag you into a world you cannot control. Amelia shook her head, her mind already working, her thoughts moving faster than her heart could keep up. She wasn't just playing for power anymore. She was playing for control. She had spent years building an empire, conquering the business world, and now she was on the verge of something far more significant. This map, with its cryptic symbols and ancient origins, held the potential to change the course of history itself. But Victor's warning lingered in her mind. Could she really control what she was about to unlock? Or would it consume her as it had consumed those who had come before her? The room was still, heavy with the tension of unspoken words and unresolved conflict. Amelia could feel the weight of Victor's gaze upon her, the way his anger simmered beneath the surface, the way he was waiting for her to falter, to second-guess herself. But Amelia didn't falter. She couldn't. Not now. She glanced at the old man, his face now a mask of resignation. "If what you say is true," she began, her voice quieter now, almost thoughtful, "then why didn't you stop me? Why didn't you keep the map for yourself?" The old man's eyes flickered with something between sadness and understanding. "Because I couldn't," he replied simply. "The map chooses its own bearer, and in the end, the bearer will always face the same fate." Victor's eyes widened, and for a moment, his mask of confidence slipped. "What do you mean by that?" he demanded. "What fate?" The old man looked at both of them with a sorrowful gaze, as if he could see the future already unfolding before him. "The map will lead you down a path. It will show you things that can change the world, but also things that can tear you apart. The one who holds it must be prepared to sacrifice everything." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. Sacrifice. The word hung in the air like a death sentence, a reminder of the price she was about to pay for the power she sought. And yet, despite everything, she couldn't turn away now. "I will pay whatever it takes," she said, her voice steady, her resolve unshakable. "I'm ready." The old man shook his head, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't understand. No one is ever truly ready for what the map demands. But you've made your choice, and now you must live with it." With those words, the room seemed to close in around her. The map in her hands felt heavier, its power pulsing with an almost palpable energy. She could feel it calling to her, pulling her toward the unknown, toward whatever lay hidden in its ancient secrets. And there was no going back. Amelia's journey had just begun. Amelia could feel the weight of the map in her hands growing heavier by the second, as if it was becoming a part of her very soul. The atmosphere around her seemed to hum with anticipation. Every breath she took, a reminder that she had crossed a line from which there would be no return. She could still hear the old man's words echoing in her mind, each one a silent warning, each one a challenge to her resolve. "You've made your choice," he had said. "Now you must live with it." But Amelia wasn't the type to shrink back from challenges. She never had been. From the moment she had set her eyes on this map, this key to unimaginable power, she had known that her destiny lay with it. Her entire life had led her to this point, and there was no turning back now. "Amelia," Victor's voice broke through her thoughts, low and dark. "You think you're prepared? But you're not. The path you're about to walk will strip you of everything you hold dear." His eyes, full of fear and rage, locked onto hers. "You'll be lost before you even reach the end." She met his gaze, unwavering. "I'm not afraid of losing everything," she said, her voice a sharp edge in the silence. "I've already lost everything that mattered." Victor's lips curled into a smile that was anything but reassuring. "Then you don't know what you're really facing." Amelia didn't flinch. She had spent years climbing the ladder of success, shedding parts of herself as she ascended. She had sacrificed friendships, love, and even her own humanity in the pursuit of power. At this moment, those losses seemed insignificant compared to the potential of what the map could offer. The promise of something greater, something more. But there was a dark undertone to that promise, one she couldn't quite shake. The old man, who had been silent for the past few moments, finally spoke, his voice heavy with a quiet urgency. "Amelia, you are about to embark on a journey that no one has ever survived unscathed. There are forces that are beyond your understanding, things that will test the very limits of your soul. The map doesn't simply show the way, it knows you, and it will show you things that will make you question who you are, who you were meant to be." Amelia could feel her pulse quicken, but she refused to let fear take root. "I've already made up my mind," she said. "I'm going." The old man's eyes softened with what might have been regret or perhaps pity. Then there's nothing more I can say. Victor stepped forward, closer to her now, his voice almost a growl. You're playing with forces that will break you, and when they do, I won't be here to pick up the pieces. Amelia turned her back on him, not out of spite, but because she needed to focus. She couldn't let him or anyone else distract her from her goal. The map was calling to her, and she knew there was no escaping its pull. As she walked toward the exit, she could feel the eyes of both men on her. The tension in the room was palpable, thick with unspoken threats and the weight of a shared history that neither Victor nor the old man had fully revealed. It didn't matter. Amelia had a purpose, and nothing would stop her from seeing it through. Outside, the cool night air hit her face, and she breathed in deeply. The world felt different, as if the map had somehow shifted the very fabric of reality around her. The streets seemed quieter, the lights more muted. It was as though she was on the cusp of something extraordinary and terrifying. The map's contents burned into her mind, the ancient symbols etched on its surface already starting to make sense in ways she hadn't expected. There was a pattern, a sequence that needed to be followed, a journey that had been waiting for centuries. But the further she dug into the map's meaning, the more the sense of unease crept up on her. There was something hidden beneath its surface, something more dangerous than she had anticipated. She paused on the edge of the city, gazing out over the skyline. The map had already begun to shape her path, and she knew where it was leading her next, to a remote, uncharted island in the farthest reaches of the ocean, a place so isolated that even the most seasoned explorers had avoided it for centuries. Legends spoke of an ancient civilization lost to time, one that had possessed knowledge and power far beyond anything humanity had ever conceived. Amelia had never been one to fear the unknown, but as she thought about the island, a shiver ran down her spine. She knew it wasn't just the unknown she was walking toward. It was something much darker, something that had been buried for a reason. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, dragging her out of her thoughts. She pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was a message from an unknown number. You have no idea what you're about to unleash. The message was cryptic, unsettling. Her first instinct was to dismiss it as some sort of prank or a warning from someone who wanted to scare her. But then her mind raced. The old man's words, Victor's threats, they all seemed to be warning her of the same thing. But why? What was she really stepping into? She quickly responded, her fingers moving over the screen. Who is this? The reply came almost instantly. It's too late. The map has chosen you, but the cost will be far greater than you can imagine. Amelia felt her heart skip a beat. The tone of the message was too direct, too personal. Whoever this was knew about the map. They knew about her. The phone buzzed again. She hesitated before opening the message. I can help you, but you must turn back now. Leave the map. It is a curse, not a blessing. Amelia's fingers hovered over the screen, her mind racing. Part of her wanted to believe the message, wanted to throw the map away and walk away from the danger that loomed ahead, but she knew she couldn't. She had come too far. The map had already begun to shape her destiny, and nothing could stop her now. Too late, she whispered to herself, tucking the phone back into her pocket. She couldn't afford to be distracted by warnings from unknown sources. Her path was clear. She had to get to the island. It was the next step in the journey. There was no turning back. As she moved toward the docks, where a boat awaited her, the air seemed to grow heavier. The city around her felt like it was receding into the distance, as if the world was becoming smaller, more distant. The only thing that mattered now was the map, and whatever it would reveal on the isolated island. Victor and the old man had warned her. They had tried to stop her. But Amelia's mind was made up. She was going to uncover the secrets the map held, no matter what the cost. And as the boat set sail into the dark, endless ocean, she couldn't shake the feeling that the map wasn't just leading her toward power. It was leading her toward her own undoing. But she had already chosen her path. There was no turning back. The boat cut through the waves with a steady hum, the rhythmic sound of the engine matching the beat of Amelia's heart. The island loomed ahead, a silhouette against the fading light, shrouded in mist, as if the very air around it refused to let go of its secrets. It was as though the island itself was waiting for her, calling her forth into its depths, ready to reveal the truths it had kept hidden for centuries. Amelia stood at the bow, her fingers clutching the map tightly. The ink on its surface seemed to shimmer in the moonlight, pulsating with a life of its own, as though it were aware of her every move. The symbols on it had begun to make more sense, their meaning clearer with every passing hour. She could feel the weight of their significance pressing against her chest, urging her forward. Victor's words echoed in her mind, but she pushed them aside. He was scared. He didn't understand what she had to do. She wasn't afraid of the dark, of what lay ahead. Fear was for those who hadn't reached the point of no return. Fear was for those who hadn't chosen the path of power. And Amelia had chosen. As the boat neared the island's jagged shore, the air grew colder, the mist thickening around them. The captain, a grizzled man who had barely spoken since they left port, kept glancing nervously at the island, his hands tight on the wheel. "This is as far as I go, miss," he said, his voice rough, tinged with a mix of fear and caution. "No one comes back from that place." Amelia didn't respond. She had already made up her mind, and no warnings could turn her away. She gathered her belongings, preparing to step onto the island, her heart racing in anticipation. The map in her hand burned like a living thing, the weight of its call settling over her like a cloak. The boat came to a halt just off the shore. The sand was dark, almost black, as if the island itself was absorbing the light. The shadows around her seemed to stretch longer, deeper, swallowing the small boat and the captain's nervous eyes. She stepped off the boat and onto the shore, feeling the cold bite of the sand against her bare feet. The ground felt ancient, alive with a strange energy that hummed beneath her skin. For a moment, Amelia hesitated, her instincts screaming at her to turn back. But she had come too far. She couldn't stop now. Not when she was so close. The map had shown her the way, a narrow path through thick trees and over rugged terrain. The air grew heavier as she walked, thick with the scent of earth and decay. Every step seemed to take her deeper into the heart of the island, as though the land itself was pulling her in, drawing her towards something that she couldn't yet understand. As she walked, she could feel the presence of something watching her. Not a person, but something much older, more ancient. It was as though the island itself was alive, aware of her presence, and it was waiting for her to make the next move. The trees seemed to close in around her, their branches twisting like the fingers of long-dead giants, reaching out to touch her, to pull her closer. The path grew steeper, the climb more treacherous. But Amelia pressed on, her determination pushing her forward. She knew that the deeper she went, the closer she was to the truth. The truth about the map, about the ancient civilization that had hidden its secrets here, and about the power that it promised. It wasn't long before she reached the heart of the island. The trees opened up into a clearing, and in the center stood an ancient stone structure, half buried in the earth, its walls cracked and weathered by centuries of neglect. A massive doorway, barely visible beneath the vines and moss, stood before her, as though waiting for her to approach. Amelia could feel the pull of the map growing stronger now. The symbols on its surface glowed faintly, urging her toward the doorway. She stepped forward, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch the stone. The moment her fingers made contact, a deep rumble reverberated through the ground, and the stone shifted, revealing an entrance hidden beneath centuries of overgrowth. With a sense of finality, Amelia stepped into the darkness. The air inside cool and heavy with the scent of ancient dust. Her flashlight flickered as she shone it across the cavernous space, revealing walls covered in intricate carvings and symbols that seemed to move and shift in the light. The walls were alive, pulsing with the same energy she had felt from the map, as though they were communicating with each other, speaking a language that had been forgotten by time. She took a deep breath, the weight of the place pressing down on her. The map had led her here, and now she knew she was at the center of whatever ancient force lay hidden within this island. The air felt thick, charged with an energy that both repelled and attracted her. Every step she took felt like a step deeper into the unknown. At the far end of the chamber, a large stone altar stood, its surface carved with the same symbols that adorned the map. A sense of awe filled Amelia as she approached it, the significance of the altar clear now. This was the heart of the island, the the place where the power she sought had been concealed for centuries. The map led her here for a reason. But what was the cost? As she placed the map on the altar, the room seemed to come alive. The walls shook, the carvings twisting and shifting as though they were being awakened from a long, deep slumber. The symbols on the map began to glow, brighter and brighter, until the light was blinding. Amelia stumbled back, her heart racing, her breath caught in her throat. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the light faded. The room fell silent. Amelia looked around, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Her hands trembled as she reached for the map, now lying on the altar, its symbols still faintly glowing. But it wasn't the map that had changed. It was something else. From the darkness behind her, a figure emerged. It was tall, cloaked in shadows, with eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. The figure moved toward her with a fluid grace, as though it was part of the very air around them. Amelia's breath caught in her throat as she realized what she was seeing. It wasn't human. The figure stopped just in front of her, and for a moment it simply stared at her with those glowing eyes. Then it spoke, its voice deep and resonant, like the echo of the earth itself. "You've come," it said, its tone filled with both recognition and sorrow. "But do you know what you've awakened?" Amelia's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the figure, unsure whether to run or to stay. The map had brought her here, but now that she had unlocked its secrets, she wasn't sure if she was ready for the truth. The figure before Amelia was neither wholly human nor entirely something else. Its presence was overwhelming, its features indiscernible in the dim light, as if it were born of shadows themselves, woven into the fabric of the night. Only its eyes stood out, glowing with a faint, eerie luminescence, like two distant stars in a vast dark sky. There was a deep, ancient energy in the air, one that sent shivers down her spine, as if the very earth was holding its breath. Amelia took a step back, her mind racing. The map had brought her to this place, but this was something far beyond what she had anticipated. She had sought knowledge, power, and a truth buried deep in time, but now, confronted with this creature, she questioned whether she was ready for what was about to unfold. "You've come," the figure said again, its voice rich with an ancient resonance that seemed to echo from the walls themselves, reverberating through her very soul. "But do you understand what you've awakened?" Amelia swallowed, trying to steady her breath. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the reason she had spent years tracking the symbols, studying the ancient texts, and following the map. She had sought the truth, and now it was here, standing before her. "I came for the knowledge hidden here," Amelia said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside her. "I came to understand what the ancients knew, what they left behind." The figure tilted its head slightly, as if considering her words. "The knowledge you seek is not meant for mortal minds," it replied, its voice tinged with a sorrow that seemed as old as time itself. "The ones who left it behind understood the cost of such power. They knew that the price of this knowledge was more than any mortal could bear." Amelia's pulse quickened. She felt the weight of its words, the gravity of the warning. She had always believed that the pursuit of knowledge was worth any price. But now, standing here, facing this mysterious being, she was beginning to wonder if she had been wrong. "What is this place?" Amelia asked, her voice barely above a whisper, though the words seemed to carry across the chamber, filling every corner of the room. "Who are you?" The figure's eyes seemed to deepen, flickering like the embers of a dying fire. "I am one of the keepers," it said, its tone heavy with ancient power. "We were entrusted with the knowledge of the old world, the secrets that could shape the fate of all things. For eons, we have waited, watching the world change, waiting for the right moment to pass on the burden." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. Keepers. The term had been mentioned in the texts she had studied, but she had never fully understood what it meant. She had assumed they were metaphorical, a symbol of guardianship, of preservation. But now, standing before this being, she realized the keepers were real. They were not mere myth. They were the ancient protectors of a power far beyond anything she had ever imagined. "You are not the first to seek the knowledge," the keeper continued, its voice growing darker. "Many have come before you, drawn by the same thirst for power, for understanding. but none of them were prepared for the consequences of their actions. The air around Amelia seemed to thicken, the oppressive weight of the island's energy growing stronger with every word the keeper spoke. The walls seemed to pulse, as if alive, as though the island itself was listening, waiting. Her fingers curled around the edges of the map, the symbols on it glowing more brightly now, reacting to the presence of the keeper. The truth is a dangerous thing, the keeper warned, its gaze fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Once it is revealed, there is no turning back. You will be bound to it, and it will be bound to you. The knowledge you seek has the power to reshape the world, but it comes with a cost. It consumes those who try to control it. The price of such power is your very soul. Amelia felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The warning should have deterred her. It should have made her step back to turn and flee from the darkness that was rapidly encroaching on her. But it didn't. The hunger for the truth, for the knowledge she had spent so long chasing, was too strong. She had come too far, sacrificed too much to turn back now. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm, though inside, doubt gnawed at her like a hunger she could not quell. "I came for the knowledge, and I will not leave without it." The keeper's eyes narrowed, the glow within them dimming slightly, as if it were considering her resolve. "Very well," it said at last. "But know this, once you accept what lies ahead, there is no unmaking it. The world will change, and you with it. The truth will reshape you, and you will never be the same." Amelia nodded, steeling herself for whatever was to come. She had made her choice. There was no turning back. The keeper extended a long, slender hand toward her, its fingers glowing with an eerie light. "Place your hand upon the map," it commanded softly. "The final step is yours to take." Amelia hesitated only for a moment before stepping forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the glowing symbols on the map. The moment she made contact, a surge of energy shot through her body, coursing through her veins like fire. The world around her seemed to collapse, the air thick with energy, the ground beneath her trembling, as if it too could feel the power that was being awakened. For a brief moment, everything went black. When the darkness receded, Amelia found herself standing in a vast, empty void. The walls of the chamber had vanished, replaced by an infinite expanse of nothingness. The only sound was the steady thrum of her own heartbeat, echoing in the silence. And then, slowly, the world began to shift. Images flashed before her eyes. Cities rising and falling, civilizations being born and destroyed, entire worlds crumbling into dust. She saw the ancient texts, the map, the symbols that had guided her here. They were not just mere markings. They were memories, echoes of the past, the foundation of everything that had come before. And within them, she saw the truth, the terrible, beautiful truth. The knowledge was not a thing to be wielded. It was a force that shaped everything in its path, rewriting history, bending the fabric of reality itself. And as she gazed upon it, she understood the price. She wasn't just seeking the knowledge. She was becoming a part of it. The power she had craved was now inside her, filling every corner of her being, wrapping around her soul like a dark, insatiable force. The map had not led her to power. It had led her to her own destruction. The keeper's voice echoed in her mind, as though it were both a warning and a lament. The truth is not a gift, Amelia. It is a curse. And with that final realization, Amelia understood that the island had not just awakened the truth, it had claimed her. The air around Amelia grew thick, the oppressive weight of ancient power pressing in from every direction. The images that had flashed before her eyes began to slow, their frantic pace dissolving into a singular haunting vision. The world, as it had been, was crumbling. But it wasn't just the past she had witnessed. It was the future, a future shaped by the knowledge she now possessed. Amelia could feel the power settling within her, an immense force that seemed to ripple through her every cell. It was not a thing that could be controlled, nor could it be dismissed. It was part of her now, coursing through her blood, altering the very structure of her mind. Every thought, every breath was saturated with the weight of what she had uncovered. The truth of the world, the ancient secrets hidden beneath time, had merged with her being. But with that fusion, a deep, gnawing pain began to consume her. The knowledge was not a gift. It was a burden. The more she understood, the more the world around her twisted. She felt the boundaries of her body stretch, her senses becoming heightened, as if she could see the very fabric of reality unraveling before her eyes. The lines between the past, present, and future blurred. She could hear the cries of civilizations long lost, feel the pulse of the earth as it trembled beneath the weight of history. And then there was the Keeper. It had not left her. Its presence was still there, in the edges of her mind, a constant reminder of the price she had paid. The Keeper's voice echoed softly in the back of her consciousness, its words lingering like a dark whisper in the night. "The truth is not yours to control, Amelia," it said. "You are but a vessel, a link in a chain far older than you can comprehend. The knowledge you carry is too much for one mind to bear. You will break under its weight." But Amelia was not broken. Not yet. With every passing moment, she became more aware of the immense power within her. She could feel the ancient forces coursing through her veins, twisting and turning, threatening to consume her. But she resisted. She had come too far to be undone by the very thing she had sought. "I will control it," Amelia whispered, more to herself than to the Keeper. "I will not be a prisoner of this knowledge." She could feel the Keeper's laughter reverberate through her mind, cold and distant. "You cannot control it," it warned. "It controls you now. You are part of something far greater than you can imagine." Amelia closed her eyes, focusing on the power within. It was overwhelming, but she refused to let it define her. She had not come all this way to be consumed by it. She had sought the truth to change the world, not to become a puppet to its ancient forces. The Keeper was right, though. The truth was a force that could not be tamed. It had the power to reshape everything, to bend time and space, to destroy and create in equal measure. And yet, Amelia could not ignore the pull it had on her. It was a part of her now, as much as her own heartbeat. But even in the face of such overwhelming power, Amelia found a spark within herself, a flicker of defiance. She would not be a vessel for this truth, a mere pawn in the hands of fate. She had come to the island for knowledge, but she would leave with something far more dangerous: the will to shape her own destiny. She opened her eyes, and the world around her shifted again. The void that had surrounded her faded, and she found herself standing once more in the chamber with the Keeper. But this time, everything felt different. The power within her thrummed with intensity, its presence undeniable. The Keeper stood before her, its glowing eyes watching her with a mixture of sorrow and resignation. "You are no longer the person you were, Amelia," the Keeper said softly. "You have become something else." Amelia looked down at her hands, her fingers trembling as she felt the energy coursing through her. She was no longer entirely human, not in the way she had once been. The truth had transformed her. She could feel it, deep within her bones, shifting the very core of who she was. "I know," she said, her voice steady, "but I am not afraid." The Keeper's eyes darkened, its form flickering as if it were fading into the shadows. "You should be," it murmured, its voice fading. "For the knowledge you carry is not without consequence. You will never be free of it. It will haunt you, shape you, until there is nothing left but the truth." Amelia didn't respond. Instead, she stepped forward, her movements fluid and certain. The power within her surged, and she felt the ancient force responding to her, acknowledging her as its new master. The Keeper's warnings echoed in her mind, but she silenced them. She had made her choice. She would control this power, not be controlled by it. The island around her began to shake, the very foundations of the earth trembling beneath the weight of the energy that had been unleashed. The walls of the chamber cracked and splintered, as if the island itself was rejecting what had occurred. But Amelia stood firm, her eyes blazing with newfound purpose. She had come for the truth, and now she held it. The world would change, yes, but it would be her hand that guided it. The secrets of the ancients, the knowledge that had been buried for centuries, were now hers to wield. The Keeper's form flickered one last time, its presence slipping away like smoke in the wind. "Do not forget," it whispered. "The truth always comes with a price." But Amelia was no longer listening. The island continued to shake, the earth cracking beneath the weight of the power she had unleashed. But Amelia did not fear it. She embraced it, and as the island began to crumble around her, she knew that this was only the beginning. The truth had a price, but Amelia had already paid it. She would reshape the world, and nothing, no force, no power, could stand in her way. As the remnants of the island began to sink beneath the crashing waves, Amelia stood tall, unwavering, amidst the storm of destruction. The truth she had sought, the knowledge she had uncovered, had transformed her in ways she could not have foreseen. But as the dust settled and the chaos receded, one thing became clear. The power she now wielded was hers alone to command. The ocean before her stretched vast and endless, mirroring the path ahead, a path that only she could walk. The world, with all its uncertainty and turmoil, was no longer an unpredictable force to be feared. It was a canvas, waiting for her to paint the future in the bold strokes of her choosing. And as the last vestiges of the keeper's voice echoed in her mind, she understood the full extent of its warning. The truth had come at a price, but it was a price she was willing to pay. For in that truth, she had found a purpose far greater than anything she could have imagined. She was no longer a mere seeker of knowledge, but the bearer of change. The weight of the ancient forces that now flowed within her no longer felt like a burden. It felt like destiny. The wind whispered through the crumbled remains of the island, carrying with it the promise of a new era, one forged by her hand. Amelia took a deep breath, the scent of salt and earth filling her lungs. The world, now on the precipice of something unimaginable, would be shaped by her vision, her will, her understanding. And with a final glance at the horizon, Amelia stepped forward, ready to lead, ready to create. She had unlocked the ancient secrets of the universe, but now it was time to write her own story. The end of one chapter was only the beginning of another. Thank you so much for staying with us through this incredible journey and watching the entire video. We truly appreciate your time and attention. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more exciting content. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue bringing you amazing stories. Leave a comment below to let us know what you think. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Stay tuned for more, and see you in the next video.